60 years. It has now been 60 years since Bloody Sunday. Tonight's program is probably... I remember as a child, we grew up watching the Jeffersons, we grew up watching Good Times, and that was really within a decade of the momentous events of the 1960s. It's now been 60 years since Bloody Sunday and the march across Edmund Pettus Bridge. There are some people who think I hate the civil rights generation. No lie could be bigger than that. I do not hate the civil rights generation. As a matter of fact, we had a lot of good people in the civil rights generation. In my family, friends, associates, we had riders in the civil rights generation. But I also recognize that there were mistakes that were made, grievous mistakes that were made. It was a movement that should have ended differently than the way that it did. And I am not going to dishonor the people who sacrificed themselves by letting their sacrifices go to waste by saying that the civil rights movement, that the civil rights generation upheld their end of the bargain, because they didn't. They didn't uphold it to the people who were there, and they certainly did not uphold it to their descendants. We are the children of the civil rights generation. We are the children of the folks who walked across Edmund Pettus Bridge. So we are the final word on what happened on that bridge and what it means and what's its significance. And we are here to render our verdict. But before we do that, we're going to have a bit of a history lesson. Because you cannot talk about why that was important. You cannot talk about why that was an important event and why we still remember this and talk about it to this day without knowing exactly who it was that you would be talking about in the first place. This is Edmund Winston Pettus, the man for whom Edmund Pettus Bridge was named. This is his biography at United States Congress.gov. You can go there and go take a look at his biography if you'd like to, and that's available for you. What it says there is that Edmund Pettus, a senator from Alabama. Do you see the way that starts? This is at the Congress.gov website. He was a senator from Alabama, born in Limestone County, Alabama, July 6, 1821, attended the common schools of Alabama and Clinton College in Smith County, Tennessee. Studied law, admitted to the bar in 1842 and commenced practice in Gainesville, Alabama. Elected solicitor for the 7th Circuit in 1844. Served as a lieutenant in the Mexican War. Well, so far, so good. Again, solicitor from 1853 to 1855. Elected judge of the 7th Circuit in 1855, but resigned in 1858 and moved to Dallas County. Resumed the practice of law. Served as envoy from Alabama to Mississippi during the formation of the Southern Confederacy. Entered the Confederate Army as a major in 1861. Was made a brigadier general of infantry in 1863. Boy, he rocketed up the ranks. And served until the close of the Civil War. Returned to Selma, Alabama, and practiced law, elected as a Democrat. What? To the United States Senate in 1897. Re-elected in 1903 and served from March 4th, 1897 until his death at Hot Springs, Madison County, North Carolina, July 27, 1907. That's Edmund Pettus. White supremacist who was willing to fight in war to uphold white supremacy. And so that was where they were marching. That was what they were up against. These were the savages of Alabama And let's please, you cannot reduce Edmund Pettus to just Edmund Pettus. He was not a savage by himself. You had a system of savages. You had a system, an entire government of Cro-Magnon barbarians and Neanderthals. Bone-chomping, blood-drinking savages. So you cannot reduce it to a Bull Connor or a Lincoln Rockwell or an Edmund Pettus. You cannot reduce it to that. Those are metaphors for a system. They were a whole league, battalions of savages. And Edmund Pettus was just one. But he's not the only one. Edmund Pettus is not the only one. He's not the only one because there were others. You see, there was a movement to lionize the Confederacy, and really that started in the 20th century, not even the 19th century. The Daughters of the Confederacy went around, but they were not the only ones. They made it their job to go and lionize people in the Confederacy as a way of inspiring other people to fondly remember the Confederacy. Fort Bragg in North Carolina. Fort Bragg in North Carolina. You know the name, but do you know the man? You heard the name Fort Bragg, but do you know the man himself? Let me introduce you to him. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Braxton Bragg. Reason magazine had an article about that, and I felt it was very interesting when they had that. It says the Department of Defense recently changed the name of Fort Bragg Army Base in North Carolina to Fort Liberty. Now, this was an article from 2023, but it says in doing so, they shifted from a name honoring an incompetent Confederate general who betrayed the U.S. to fight for slavery to a name honoring America's most fundamental value. Seems like a no-brainer. And of course, Ron DeSantis and Mike Pence. Of course, the Republicans, because the savages are still among us to this day. Now, I thought this was very interesting because they said he was an incompetent Confederate general. Well, that's a strong thing to say there. I mean, just because he was a white supremacist and a slave owner and a racist and fought in a war against the United States government, that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to have name calling here, do we? Okay, well, I would go ahead and run down his list of accomplishments from Tampa Bay Times. They were also taking Ron DeSantis to task. Of course, Ron DeSantis, who never saw a white supremacist cause that he didn't enjoy. According to the Tampa Bay Times, an interesting article here I want to go over with you all. It says here that the governor, they're referring to Ron DeSantis, is upset that the U.S. military changed the name of North Carolina's Fort Bragg to Fort Liberty earlier this month. Now, this was back in 2023. He called it political correctness run amok and said he would restore the name if voters elected him president. But Braxton Bragg is no cancel culture martyr. The military base should never have been named in his honor, not when Camp Bragg opened in 1918, and certainly not now. Naming military institutions after Confederate generals and erecting statues of them was all the rage in the early 1900s. What? Folks, I have to keep reminding you here, please remember that was over 40 years after the Civil War was over. So they began the effort, which they still do to this day, of rewriting history, trying to impact the future by rewriting it. So 4 decades later, there's this huge swell by these unreformed Confederates and unreformed insurrectionists to name military bases, statues, buildings, bridges, to commemorate and to institutionalize their white supremacist martyrs, to make them part of the fabric of whole communities and states. Not in the 1800s, but in the 1900s. We've already done that program before, but it's well worth you learning about so that you understand how we got to Edmund Pettus Bridge. Naming military institutions after Confederate generals and erecting statues of them was all the rage in the early 1900s, part of the effort decades after the Civil War to reshape it as a noble Southern fight, a pernicious a perniciousness rooted in white supremacy and other dangerous lost cause nonsense. Only in that lamentable political environment would Bragg be remembered in such a favorable way as to have a base named after him. Even if Bragg's supporters were to mitigate his slave ownership by citing the era in which he lived, which is nonsense also. Don't let anybody tell you that, well, things were different back then. No, it wasn't. Slavery has been an abomination since the Old Testament. No one was under any misgivings. And they would reenact it today if they could. So this is the times you live in, the white supremacist times you live in, and you're still there today. Now it says, even if Bragg's supporters want to mitigate his slave ownership by citing the era in which he lived, his military record is hardly first rate, especially his time as a general in the Civil War. Oh, didn't I just tell y'all about that? Alrighty here, let's hear about Incompetence. By most accounts, he performed well at the Battle of Shiloh in 1862, which, remember, was a stunning Confederate loss. But after that, now listen to what they're saying, they say, by most accounts, and you take that with a grain of salt, they're saying that Braxton Bragg, he fought well at the Battle of Shiloh, even though they lost. Well, you lost, but you fought well. They say, that was the only good news we have about him. After that, now we're talking about he lost that, they give him compliments for losing the Battle of Shiloh. Well, what happened after that? Oh, folks, it's all downhill from here. He took control of the Army of Mississippi that same year, but an invasion of Kentucky ended with his retreat. Damn! Oh, folks, it all goes downhill from here. He retreated again a few months later at the Battle of Stones River in Tennessee. What? He surrendered Middle Tennessee to the Union in 1863 after getting outmaneuvered. Auntie, chill! He helped win the Battle of Chickamauga later in 1863, though he was criticized for not pursuing and potentially destroying his Union adversaries. Union General Ulysses S. Grant routed Bragg's army in the Battle of Chattanooga. Damn! After which Confederate President Jefferson Davis accepted Bragg's resignation, though Davis later made him his chief military advisor in Richmond. What? If anybody ever tells you that the Confederacy was filled with great soldiers and great military minds, all I can say is folks love going back and rewriting history. Davis made him his chief military advisor in Richmond, Virginia, the headquarters of the Confederacy. Bragg is routinely listed among the worst Civil War generals. Two of his main biographies are titled Braxton Bragg and Confederate Defeat. What? And Braxton Bragg, the most hated man on the Confederacy. Damn! One of the books concluded, quote, much of this criticism was justified, for Bragg had done as much as any Confederate general to lose the war. Not enough? So this is the guy you named the military base after? What exactly was it he did that made him deserving of that? So he was the guy, he beat out all the other candidates? Why? How? How do you justify this? Now that you all are actually hearing the reality of Fort Bragg and who it's named after, by the way, yes, they did change the name. Now they changed it back and named it after a guy named Bragg in World War II, so they think they're slick. Yes, they did change the name. They changed the name to Fort Liberty, and now Trump changed it, and Pete Hex is named after some guy in World War II, which is fine. That's great about World War II, but let us remember, you're still trying to lionize and prolong the name Bragg. So we're going to make sure that you understand the name here. If you want to, I'm all for keeping the name out there. I'm like, oh, no, don't remove his name. Since y'all decided to put it up there, and we going to tell his whole damn story. Since you decided it was a good idea to put his name up there, we're going to tell the whole story of Braxton Bragg. Now here, it goes on here. It says he also had a reputation for picking unnecessary fights with other officers and for overly strict discipline, which did not always endear him to his troops. In his memoir, Grant relayed a story about Bragg serving as both company commander and quartermaster of a frontier post years before the Civil War. As commander, Bragg denied his own request as quartermaster for supplies and then referred the decision to the post commandant, who, according to Grant's possibly apocryphal "look it up" account, said, quote, "My God, Mr. Bragg, you have quarreled with every officer in the Army, and now you are quarreling with yourself." Damn! This is the guy that you named the base after, that you're fighting. Tell me, you want to talk about DEI and undeserved. Okay, what did this guy do that he's worth fighting for? We can tell you why our heroes and icons are worth fighting for. Can anyone explain what the hell he did? Okay, just on a military basis. Leave the fact that he was a white supremacist scumbag out of it completely. By the way, dude, what did you do in military service to be deserving of one of the largest bases we have on the planet for your name to be on it? What did you do? What was it that you did that everybody remembers so fondly other than be in the Confederacy? Other than that, what did you do? Because we took a look at your track record. Folks, tell me, where's the record that they're proud of? The only thing we see is, well, he was in the Confederacy. Okay, then other than being a white supremacist, what about his military record? What about his military record are you proud of? Well, you see, So when you hear about Edmund Pettus and Braxton Bragg and all the other white supremacists out there, I want you to be aware of this on this Bloody Sunday, that's what my people were fighting against and marching against. That's what they were going against. And the folks who would support this, please understand, it's not about logic or reason. White supremacy is not about logic or reason. It's about power. It is about power, degeneracy, barbarism, inhumanity. That's what it's about. This is about the savages versus the civilized. And to be clear, we are the civilized, they are the savages. But the savages are very much still out there. Very much still out there and very much eager to topple civilization again. Don't ever forget that. The savages are still out there and they are still chomping at the bit to topple civilization again. They live every day dreaming of taking us back to the caves, so you can eat your dead relatives or any strangers who might wander by. No reason you can't chomp on them. And don't worry about finding a wife. Well, just go grab the 12-year-old down the street and throw her over your shoulder. Because that's all part and parcel of their wicked, demonic, degenerate culture. So don't let that get in your way. Yes, we have to hold the line because we are the only thing stopping the barbarians and barbarism and savagery from taking over. That's what we were marching against. Bastardized by the Democrats and the corporate media, but that's what we were out there for. I bring that up because I want you to remember where we came from with this. And I'm going to use this as an opportunity to make yet another reminder to you all. When you talk about Edmund Pettus, when you talk about Braxton Bragg, you can't do that without also remembering other white supremacist arch fiends like Alexander Stephens. Alexander Stephens, who was the vice president of the Confederacy. When the Confederate States seceded from the United States, Jefferson Davis was the president, and this was his vice president, Alexander Stephens. So for those of you who are too young, and the schools don't even teach this, so let me go ahead and just recap it for you here. Just like the United States government has a president and a vice president, when the Confederate States broke off, they went so far as to elect their own president and to elect their own vice president. Jefferson Davis was the president of the Confederacy. They made it just that far. And this was his boneheaded, eagle-eyed, bug-eyed, white supremacist vice president, Alexander Stephens. Now, to the young folks out there, I'm talking about those of you in your 40s, 30s, and 20s, either because you have negligent parents or because you have an oppressive school system that is hell-bent for leather on deceiving you with propaganda. They do not tell you the truth about the Confederacy. You will have one of the lies that gets repeated all the time, because remember, white supremacy is about lying. They will tell you that the Confederacy was not about racism. It wasn't about race. It was about Southern heritage. Of course, I always debunk it by simply asking one question, and you can ask this question to anybody who tries to ever lie to you and tell you the Confederacy was not about race. To just tell them what part of Southern culture that I can be proud of was the Confederacy trying to preserve. Damn! We, as black people, we are Southerners also. So tell us what part of our Southern heritage we should be proud of that the Confederacy was attempting to preserve. Because unless you're saying that white people are the only Southerners, well, if it's not about race, well, us black folk, we were Southerners too. So tell us what part of our history and what part of if the Confederacy is about Southern heritage, then please tell me what part of my Southern heritage that they were attempting to preserve. For those of you who saw my documentary film, Race War, you saw that Richard Spencer himself, Richard Spencer with all his degrees, he went up against Jason Black. You all saw it for yourselves. He tried that it wasn't about race, and then all I had to do was tell him, well, then tell me what part of my Southern heritage should I be proud of when I see the Confederacy? And as you all remember, that was the end of that. Roland Martin couldn't do it. CBS couldn't do it. He sat there with me and he broke down just like that. For those of you who remember seeing that, yeah, he didn't make it any further. Because it's all, they know exactly what it's about. It's about seeing if you're silly enough and stupid enough and uninformed enough. And talking about Ron DeSantis, he's one of the white supremacist demagogues who's going around rewriting the history books, telling you that there is no slavery. They were indentured servants. This is how vicious it is, people. We're well beyond Nazi Germany at this point. We're on the fourth step. We're on step 5. Please understand that. I bring you to Alexander Stephens because there is no greater authority on the Confederacy, could it be, than the man who served as his vice president. And the cornerstone speech, because it is the cornerstone speech. He wrote the cornerstone speech to explain to people why it was that he and the Confederate States were seceding from the Union. Well, then there's no greater authority and there's no need to argue about it. You've come to the source. Whatever he says is their reason for seceding, that's the reason. So why don't we go take a look at exactly what part of Southern culture it was that he was attempting to preserve that the rest of us have just gotten wrong, or whatever the case may be. What part of it that he was attempting to preserve? It should be very simple there. Oh boy. It says here, the Constitution, it is true, secured every essential guarantee to the institution while it should last, and hence no argument can be justly urged against the constitutional guarantees thus secured because of the common sentiment of the day. Those ideas, however, were fundamentally wrong. They rested upon the assumption of the equality of the races. Oh, so he's saying that equality of the races is a false, erroneous assumption. Tell us more, Mr. Stephens. They rested upon the assumption of the equality of the races. This was an error. It was a sandy foundation, and the government built upon it fell when the storm came and the wind blew. He's referring to the United States government and their decision to secede from it. Now, here it goes, people. He says, our new government, he's referring to the Confederacy, our new government is founded upon exactly the opposite idea. Its foundations are laid, its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to the superior race, is his natural and normal condition. This Our new government is the first in the history of the world based upon this great physical, philosophical, and moral truth. This truth has been slow in the process of its development, like all other truths in the various departments of science. It has been so even amongst us. Many who hear me perhaps can recollect well that this truth was not generally admitted even within their day. Well, so much for Alexander Stephens and Braxton Bragg and Edmund Pettus were just creatures of their day, because according to none other than Alexander Stephens, well, people were disputing him. It was very much in dispute. People were telling him that he was wrong. Why, they had to fight to get people to say that black people are not human. Well, so much for they were creatures of their day, because even back in their day, folks were like, man, dude, you're on some nonsense. That's wrong. You're crazy. He's admitting, yeah, we have to break off because people keep telling us that we're wrong. Nobody wants to accept it. We've had to fight to get people to accept it. Well, I'll be damned. So they were not, the creatures of their day were exactly the same as we have now. He was just willing to be enough of a barbarian and a savage to go forward with it. So to anyone who tells you that Edmund Pettus and Braxton Bragg and Robert E. Lee and any Stonewall Jackson and any of the rest of them, these were not hardcore white supremacists, and that their entire purpose for going to war was to practice white supremacy. Here you have, I'm bringing you all the information analysis, so you should never lose a debate, people. I'm bringing you the evidence right here. Here you have the Confederate Vice President of the Confederacy admitting that. And by the way, when I brought that in front of Jared Taylor, just argument over. He tried it for a minute until I said, by the way, what about Alexander Stephens? I said the cornerstone speeches. Oh, yeah. About the cornerstone rest. Oh, well, okay. Yes, people, they depend on you not knowing. They have no problem walking up in front of you and lying to your face. They're hoping you don't know any of this. That's all they're counting on, is that you don't know. And we cannot depend on the public schools to teach this. The public schools are white supremacist indoctrination centers. Ron DeSantis and the rest of them are scrubbing the history books. Not that the history books even taught this, by the way. Your history books taught about the Civil War, and they may have taught about slavery. They didn't teach about this. I was born and raised in Shreveport, Louisiana, the last capital of the Confederacy. When the Confederacy started getting pushed west, they retreated all the way to Shreveport, Louisiana. Shreveport was the last capital of the Confederacy. We didn't get taught anything about the Cornerstone speech when I was in school. We got taught about Jefferson Davis. Now there's like a paragraph about Jefferson Davis in the books, nothing about Alexander Stephens. And Alexander Stephens is the one that gives the most damning commentary. He was the vice president of the Confederacy, and he's here to tell you that our government, we are starting the Confederacy based on one principle, that the white man is supreme and the black man is subhuman and subjugated. And that's all there is to it. Nothing in here about, well, the North has different values and they don't practice the same capitalism that we do. And the North is not as religious as we are. And the North doesn't believe in traditional values. Not a word about that. He's saying, look here, the whole point of this new government is white supremacy. And one more thing to remind you, because, by the way, Alexander Stephens, I agree with this statement here. Absolutely. He says this, our new government is the first in history, the first in the history of the world to create a government based on white supremacy. Well, I agree with that, folks. I agree with that. All the way back in the 1800s, I'm talking about the early 1800s to the mid 1800s. Oh, I agree with that. I agree with it. And we know this is true because 60 years later, Adolf Hitler, after the Beer Hall Putsch, after they overthrew the Weimar Republic, the Nazis said that they based their movement on America. They said that America was their, Nazi Germany learned white supremacy from America. America did not learn Nazism from Germany. Germany learned Nazism from America. They said America is proof that you can have an entire nation based on white supremacy that practices segregation, and that nation can be successful. You can have a successful, prosperous nation based on white supremacy. And they said, look at the United States. People notice Nazi Germany did not say, look at the southern states. They said, look at America. They didn't say, look at the southern states, look at America. Because white supremacy was practiced everywhere. So yes, I agree with you, Alexander Stevens. You're absolutely right. America was the first government. The Confederacy was simply an alliteration of that. But yes, the first government in history that was dogged and determined to be founded on not the concept of freedom of speech, the concept of white supremacy. And when you all think about it there, that actually makes a lot more sense. I mean, passing down free speech. I mean, what kind of legacy is that? I mean, that can come and go. That can be up for debate. Your whiteness, however, now that's something that everyone can agree on. Maybe you all don't agree on whether or not you should be allowed to say certain things. Maybe you don't agree on whether everyone doesn't agree on whether or not you should have the right to bear arms. Maybe you don't agree on what privacy should be called. Maybe you don't agree on whether or not you should be able to own land. But you can all agree on your whiteness. Now, that's the one point of commonality that you would all have. So would a government be based upon freedom of speech and freedom of religion? Is that the foundation of it? Or would it be safer to say, hey, you know, we argue about religions. We argue about it to this day. But we are all unified about whiteness. We all have an interest in whiteness. So when you think about it, that makes more sense, doesn't it? To rally around that as a foundation for a government. So 60 years later, when Adolf Hitler wanted to find something to get Germans to rally around, didn't have enough black folk in Germany, so he found a minority group that they suspect has black heritage to it. You're close enough. Look at your nose, look at your hair. Look at your forehead. You're not Negroes, but you'll do. You'll do. You're the stand-in for the Negroes. You'll do. And what did they say? Take a look at the United States. They learned all their laws, segregation, miscegenation, lynching. They learned all these tactics from the U.S. Terrorism, the brown shirts, bombing people's neighborhoods. Please remember that, y'all. Black Wall Street was in the 1920s. Please remember, they were blowing up our neighborhoods. The blowing up of the Black Wall Streets was happening before Nazi Germany. So who taught them that you could practice domestic terrorism on racial lines? Who taught them this? Where did they learn that? Because you see, usually it would just be a revolution and uprising and it'd just be one group against another and now all get settled in one day. This was this ongoing domestic terrorism. Yes, when you all go take a look at the timelines, your teachers didn't teach you this. Ron DeSantis doesn't want you to hear this because when you hear this, it's like, oh, wait a minute. South Carolina, Kentucky, Texas, Tennessee, Arkansas, Louisiana, New York. None of the schools teach what I'm telling you all right now. None of the schools teach you this. You might get lucky and end up in an African studies class or something in college, but the public schools do not teach what I'm telling you right now, because if you learn this at the age of 5 or 6, ain't nobody gonna be able to tell you that white supremacy doesn't exist. Because all the pieces fit. When you put this on the table, well, I'll be damned, all the pieces fit. How your current life is turning out for you today, it all fits now. It all makes sense. Then when you take a look at Nazi Germany, you're supposed to demonize them. But when I tell you, by the way, they learned from the United States. No, that can't be. That can't be. Hitler just woke up one day and decided it's white supremacy. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But what we know for a fact is that as far as institutionalizing white supremacy, how do you execute white supremacy as a socio-political government? How do you make a government based on white supremacy? Is there a template for it? Has anybody been able to do it? Up until the United States, no one had done it. No one had a government based on white supremacy that was functional. No one did it before the US. Nazi Germany didn't invent the wheel nor reinvent it. They just bought it from America. America made the wheel. Nazi Germany just bought one from them. So it all makes sense to you now. Now it all makes sense. And so what do you know, folks? At the same time that Adolf Hitler is rising to power in Germany, the daughters of the Confederacy are going around demanding that all these states erect statues of all these Confederate generals who, as we showed you, were monumental failures. But that wasn't the purpose nor the reason for doing it. It was because all of the old soldiers from the Confederacy were dying out, and that whole generation was dying out, and they wanted to make sure that they had immortalized the movement. That was what they were trying to do before they were all dead. And you're sitting here thinking that those statues have been up for a century and a half, and literally many of your relatives are older than those statues are. Those statues are recent. So when you talk about Edmund Pettus, when you talk about those people, you need to have a clear concept of that. I want to remind you all of one thing here. My birth certificate, and I've talked about this before, my birth certificate says that I was born at Confederate Memorial Hospital. What? My birth certificate says that I was born at Confederate Memorial Hospital. Now, today, they call that hospital Louisiana State University Medical Center. Yeah, folks, I'm not talking about my parents or my grandparents or my great-grandparents. I'm talking about me. My birth certificate says Confederate Memorial Hospital. And it has only been in my lifetime in Louisiana under, I think it was Governor Edwin Edwards. It was in my lifetime, not my grandmama, not my grandparents. It's been in my lifetime that the birth certificates no longer say Confederate, that the place was renamed Louisiana State Medical Center, LSU Hospital. But my birth certificate says Confederate Memorial before they changed the name. Yeah, they'll try to act as if this stuff is a century old. How are you going to say, all that stuff ended with slavery, and take a look at my damn birth certificate. Take a look at my damn birth certificate. That ain't 100 years old, people. That's not 100 years old. Hell, in reality, it's not even 50. Because it's not like they changed it the day I was born. It was years after I was born before they changed it. That was years later. Years. So please understand that. When they try to tell you that all that's behind you and whatnot, the hell it is. Yeah, there are others of you who are named after other hospitals. I want y'all to understand the Confederacy had its own pension plan. What? For those of you who don't know. Yeah, like the Confederacy had its own pension plan. It had its own retirement system. So they had hospitals, they had businesses. Y'all need to go take a look at this. They're not going to tell you in these schools because when we talk about reparations and who owes us, for those of you who did not know, Mississippi and Louisiana were two of the richest. Mississippi was probably at the top of the heap for that's the one they remember most. I still argue that Louisiana was probably richer than Mississippi. But remember, Mississippi had more millionaires per capita than any place on earth at the time of King Cotton. Remember? Mississippi had more millionaires per capita than any place on the planet. For those of you who don't know, I'm not making this up. You can Google this. Don't believe me. I might be making this up. Go Google this. Mississippi had more millionaires per capita than any place on the planet at that time. Although I will argue that Louisiana was actually richer than Mississippi, although Louisiana's always sucked at capitalizing on it. But please understand this. So yeah, there was plenty of money and plenty of paper, and I'm just letting y'all know, yeah, they had their own, they paid their soldiers, they had like their own retirement system. They had their own retirement system, folks. So when the war was over and they were simply allowed, when Robert Lee at Appomattox negotiated for a ceasefire, I want y'all to understand, nobody, they say that the South lost the Civil War, but there's a reason why they don't say that they lost it. They just say it's a lost cause, because in reality, it was simply a cessation of hostilities. What Robert Lee negotiated at Appomattox was simply that they would be allowed to just go home. Essentially, it was no harm, no foul. That was what happened at Appomattox. Don't believe me. Look it up and read it for your damn selves. They didn't surrender. They negotiated a cessation of hostilities. They were basically told, y'all just put down your guns and go home. And they went straight home and started killing black folk when they got there. But nobody was punished, nobody was hung, nobody was tried. They didn't have to declare that they lost. It was just okay, call it quits, no harm, no foul, y'all just go home. And that's exactly what happened. They were allowed to go back with all of their wealth and everything else intact, including chattel slavery. What? Including that. Jason, how can you say that? Because remember, we still had to get the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments before it stopped. We still had to have not just 13 people, we had to have 13, 14, and 15. And to be totally honest, remember, y'all have heard stories that there were black folk who were in captivity right up until damn near halfway through the 20th century. So they talk about Juneteenth, but Juneteenth is really just referring to Texas. In reality, there were black people in chattel slavery in America well into the 20th century. And I'm not just talking about 1905 and 1910. Jason might be making that up, but maybe you should go Google that. Come on back and see if you can prove me wrong. That ain't true. We ain't found nothing like that. Go ahead and Google it and try to prove me wrong. Try it. I'll wait. Try it. What I'm saying is take a look at everything I've told you all in just the last 42 minutes. Take a look at what I've told you all in just the last 42 minutes. Do you realize that if you had a class like this at your school, you'd all be walking out of there quiet and somber? You've never had an experience like this in any of your grade schools. You haven't had an experience like this in any of your colleges. Why the hell not? What's wrong? What was missing? When I say it like this, people, when I put that in its context about what was happening at that time, then when you have a Malcolm Little who becomes Malcolm X, 1925, when you have these incidents occur, when you see what our condition was and what was really going on and what the attitudes were and who the savages and bastards were that we were up against, that puts it in a whole new perspective for you. How evil do you have to be to name a bridge after Edmund Pettus? How wicked and savage do you have to be to name a military base after Braxton Bragg? Tell me how demonic and animalistic you have to be in order to do something like that. And to smile. Now, I'm going to take you even further with it right here, right now. I don't even want them to change the names. What? I am not one of those people. I want them to leave that thing right there where it is. I want them to leave it right there. But I want Edmund Pettus's name to remain exactly where it is, but then I want it to be told his entire story right next to it. Welcome to the bridge of the demon Edmund Pettus. have a big plaque there that tells his story. This is the story of the animalistic white supremacist savage Edmund Pettus and the governor of Alabama who commissioned this bridge in honor of this murderous madman. I do not ever want them to change the names of these things. I want it to live forever in infamy. I want it to be right there. I don't want the world to ever forget the savagery and the evil and the barbarism of white supremacy. I want every one of their names emblazoned and preserved until the end of time. I don't want us to ever remove them. People, understand something. White supremacy's power isn't being invisible. The reason why Bloody Sunday was a overwhelming success was because it was lights, camera, action, and the whole world got to see what they were doing. The civil rights movement understood that what they were doing was in the South and across America, but particularly in the South, they were practicing white supremacy in private. They were telling you wasn't no white supremacy. They were telling you we ain't mistreating no black folks down here. Everything is fine, separate but equal. Take a look at all the nice smiling niggas over there. Everybody loves it down here. They're perfectly fine with it the way it is. And by the way, nobody's being mistreated. And Bloody Sunday was a worldwide example of no, they're lying. They are practicing chattel slavery and barbarism here. They now could no longer lie about it. Dragging white supremacy into the spotlight is how you destroy it. White supremacy's power is in getting you to say that there is no white supremacy, even while they practice it. As a matter of fact, there's no such thing as white. You notice I've taught you all this now for 2 decades. They identify every other race in the media except white. White's the only subject we don't talk about in depth. They talk about black studies, black mothers, black relationships, black on black crime. Well, isn't it amazing? We don't talk about white mothers, white relationships, white on white crime. Matter of fact, you don't talk about white nothing. Ain't no white people. Ain't no white nothing. Don't even use that word. Ain't no white. I'm not white. I'm just a guy. Now you're black. Now when they talk about you, you're black. But when it's time to talk about them, ain't no white. You're not even allowed to use the word white. We don't want to talk about white. There is no white. So as long as it's invisible, how do you exterminate it if it's invisible? They demand that you can't even use its name. You can't even use the word. So white supremacy's strategy is to be invisible. Nobody even acknowledges it exists. You don't even talk about it. Well, if you don't talk about it, you can't get rid of it. So dragging Edmund Pettus and Braxton Bragg and Jefferson Davis and Alexander Stephens, dragging all of them into the open, that's what we need. We don't need anybody trying to bury them, anybody trying to erase them, anybody trying to remove them. No, we need them right here because I'm very glad that you made these monuments to monsters. I'm very glad that they made all of these monuments to monsters because now we don't have to prove that these demons and these devils existed. You've already made monuments to them. We just need to tell their story now. The monument is right there. The only thing I want now is I demand that we tell its story. We're now going to tell Edmund Pettus' story, and not just his, the story of all of you murderous white supremacist bastards, dead and living, who supported this. None of you should be allowed to get away. In the chat room, you're talking about Ron DeSantis. There's a reason why Ron DeSantis is not going to become president of the United States and cannot become president of the United States. Is because we put it in its proper context. He wanted to defend white supremacy, and we showed him, you know what, and that's what you will be known as. Before it was over, he realized the mistake he made. Y'all remember when Nikki Haley refused to say slavery. She refused to talk about slavery and that it being evil. Ron DeSantis woke up too late. All of a sudden, he had a problem with slavery. All of a sudden, slavery was bad. Too late, Ron. Too late. So yeah, he understood it. He got it. He woke up and tried to pivot too damn late. But he knew it. But it was too late, Ron. We already put that jacket on you. You're going to have to wear it. You're going to have to wear it and walk it. As I said to you all last night, when the black constituency and black society turns on you, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to move around, especially nationally. You're not going to be able to move around. You're not going to be able to do it. That garbage flies down there in Florida. You try to take it nationally, you ain't going nowhere. Gavin Newsom, you might be able to get away with some garbage in California. You try to make it nationally, you ain't going to fly. You're not going to be able to move around. Ain't going to happen. And we're going to be right there to remind every damn body who you are and what you stood for and what you believe. So get ready to be Ron Edmund Pettus, Ron Braxton Bragg DeSantis. That's who you gonna be. You are Ron Fort Bragg DeSantis, and you will not be allowed to go in any different direction. Not at all. Not at all. However, you might disagree. Therefore, we're going to go ahead and open up the Zoom for you all. We're going to go ahead and open up the Zoom for you here. So, if you'd like to discuss that, you can. I'm not going to be on too late here tonight. I've had a lot of moving around to do. Got a whole lot going on here. So being able to sit still for a little bit is going to be kind of hard for me to do here. So I got a lot more moving around to do, getting some things done. We'll see how that turns out. I want to thank everyone, and I do mean everybody who's contributed to tonight's program on PayPal, Super Chat, Venmo. Sandra, she's trying to get back in my good graces. I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Sandra. Appreciate that. Also, big shout out here to Keenan. Thank you very much for your support as well. And my man, Mr. Richburg. Thank you for your support as always. We're going to take a very brief commercial, non-commercial break. When we come back, we'll be taking a couple of calls from you and more. This is the Black Channel.
When you visit MrBeTheTeacher.com, you can get a copy of his award-winning book, Guidelines for the Successful Student. While you're there, grab one of his newest tunes along with fun and educational lyric videos.
Never give up, don't worry, never give up, study. In order to
times 1 is 2, 2 times 2 is 4, 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times swap names, he, she, they, and we. Simplify the daddy divides as the father and guide. Mommy multiplies and shares on what they buy.
You can also acquire his tutoring services via varsitytutors.com or tutor.com. If you wish to speak to Steve Burgess directly, you can do so through MrBeTheTeacher.com.
The Honey Badger and the Mongoose is a children's story for the family of how a honey badger and mongoose fight an evil alliance of venomous cobra snakes and hyenas that overhauls the balance of the savannah. The Big Five. The honey badger demands reparations. Will the Big Five give the honey badger reparations? Can the evil alliance of cobras and hyenas be stopped? The best new price for the hard and soft cover is at www.thehoneyBadgerandthemongoose.com. You can also find this book at Amazon, Audible, and Kindle.
Order yours today to experience all the benefits of Ash Kickin' Body Butter. With skin so smooth and soft, you'll thank us for it. Shop Ash Kickin' online. That's ASHKICKIN.com.
Hi, this is Brenda Starr, creator of Poetry with a Purpose and author of the book Pressed But Not Crushed. Pressed But Not Crushed is an anthology of political poems that address current and historical issues in American descendants of slave population and African American population. The book describes slavery and its residuals, Jim Crow segregation, social depredation, and other relevant issues to American descendants of slaves and African Americans, including the current political climate that does not address our issues.
This is the Black Channel. I am your host, your brother, your humble servant, Black Authority. Very glad to be with you all here this evening. It's the 60th anniversary of Bloody Sunday, the march across Edmund Pettus Bridge. I do not want us to forget where we have been, because when you forget where you've been, you forget where you've come from. I have absolutely no intention of doing that. But I also want us to understand that where you have come from is also supposed to be related to where you're going. That's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be related to where you're going. And if you don't have a clear sign of that, that's a problem, because you don't know if you're making mistakes or not. You don't know if you're making mistakes or not. We are here tonight also because we are the children of the integration generation. We're the children of the integration generation, and we're here to tell people whether or not that worked. We're here to tell them whether or not that worked. You see, you don't get to sit up here and say, well, don't worry, we did a good job in the 60s and everything's fine. No. We as the children, we are the final report card. We're the final report card on whether or not what you did was effective, whether or not what you did was right. You don't get to just sit up here and declare you were correct. You don't get to do that. That's not what you get to do. You don't get to sit up here and tell us that you did a great job for us. We're the ones who tell you whether you did a great job. We're the ones who tell you whether or not what you did was accurate, whether or not what you did was effective. We're the ones who tell you. You don't get to just sit up here and tell us everything was fine. We did a great job for y'all. No. We'll tell you if you did a great job. We'll tell you if you had the right strategy. We'll tell you if you were effective. We will tell you if it was successful. Do not get it mistaken. We had some riders. We had some folks who were 10 toes down, people that we cannot just be proud of, we can be esteemed of. We have people that we can be esteemed of. Please understand that. Please understand that. I had gotten a reminder earlier today. About exactly how effective we were back then. Because a lot of folks don't know about that. But I had gotten a reminder today of exactly how effective we were back then. And one of the things in particular that folks don't talk about and folks don't speak about, it was good to have that. Because if you don't, then next thing you know, the reason for studying history isn't just so you have history out there. That's not the whole reason for it. The reason for having it there is so you can see whether or not folks try to sit up here and sell you on something that's not true. That's the thing that you have to watch out for. They want to see if they can sell you on something that's not true. One of the things in particular there, they were talking about Lewis Powell. I saw a video today, they were talking about Lewis Powell. Now, he was a lawyer back in 1971, I believe it was. And he had a bone to pick with Ralph Nader, and he was there to defend corporations. He was one of them folk who was defending like the cigarette companies. So it was all about defending corporations. It was all about that. But he wrote a memo. He wrote a paper to describe exactly what the strategies were that they should use and exactly who the problem was. And when he wrote this paper, and you all can go look him up, Lewis Powell, when he wrote this paper, he specifically mentioned that biggest issue that they had was that he said among the colored folk, he said you have these highly intelligent, highly charismatic, highly persuasive individuals. He was acknowledging that even though many of them they weren't college educated, they weren't formally trained at Toastmasters or something, and yet coming from the grassroots, you had these amazing intellectual and social dynamos that came up from the soil to the extent that they were giving them fits at the very highest levels of corporate America and the government. That's what we made of. That's how the descendants of the slaves laid the foundation. That's how we created American culture. That's how we redefined what it meant to stand up against tyranny. That you have a bunch of folks out there who they're not part of the system, they haven't been formally trained, they're not your pet Negroes, and yet even he was saying they're highly intelligent and highly charismatic, highly persuasive. So let me get this straight. A bunch of non-college educated black folk out there, you talking about Fred Hampton, and they're kicking y'all's asses and from your big Ivy League schools and your big corporate environments, and a ragtag group of civil activists is kicking your asses? They're doing a far better job of communicating and persuading than you are, and they're the underdogs. They're the ones that you're oppressing. At the time, only 10% of the population? Minus 10% of the population? That's what we were doing. That's what we were doing, and even our enemies were acknowledging, I'll be damned, you're not formally trained, you're not incredibly financed, and they're beating us. They're beating us. White folk were still, around 90% of the population at the time? And he was saying that America was a minority nation. How the hell are we a minority nation if we're only 10% of the population? Oh yeah, because we were a very persuasive 10%. The 10% is deciding where the trajectory of the nation is going. No jet planes, no atom bombs, the power of our ideas and the strength of our will, and had them backing down. That is the esteem of the people who crossed Edmund Pettus Bridge. They were strategic. They knew what they were doing, folks. They didn't just get up one day because they were bored. The folks who masterminded that understood that they wanted to get the nation to rally around them. Dr. King, he understood getting the nation rallied around him. It was essential to get Bull Connor and the rest of these folk here to show what they really were. That's why it is essential that we get the Donald Trumps and the Ben Shapiros and the Joe Bidens and the Gavin Newsoms to show exactly who they really are. It is essential that you get them to speak and tell you what they actually really are, because when they don't speak, you're assuming things. Usually you'll be assuming the best. No, let them talk so you can see the real thing come out. Now they can no longer hide it. Their whole agenda is preventing that moment from occurring, stopping you from ever being able to show that that's what it is. Because we all have this story. Take a look in your family and whatnot, even the biggest Coonish family. We all have this story. We all have this story. It is essential that we remember Edmund Pettus Bridge. We do not distort it. We don't have to lionize John Lewis. But we need to remember Edmund Pettus Bridge and all of the others, because these were essential steps on beating back white supremacy. And now we are going to take a look at the things that were done right and the things that were done wrong, and we're going to refine it. We are not going to let anybody tell us that everything was done right. No, it wasn't. And we are going to be fearless and shameless in calling out what they did wrong, because the work is not done. 60 years after Edmund Pettus Bridge, we should be exactly where we need to be in America today, and we are not. We should be exactly where we need to be in America today, and we are not. Socioeconomically, we are exactly where we were back in 1960. We should be somewhere else today, and we're not. Do not tell me that it was a resounding success and take a look at where we are, exactly where we were then. Still talking about the same issues, still talking about the same problems, still talking about the same complaints. Don't tell me that everything's fine. Don't tell me that you succeeded. And literally, we've never stopped talking about the same complaints. Very clearly, it wasn't a success the way they tried to distort it into being. Very clearly, it wasn't. So we are here today, we're here tonight to promote the unfinished business of Bloody Sunday and the march across Edmund Pettus Bridge and every other. We're here to deal with the unfinished business because it has not been finished and it's not done. That was just the start. We're not going to let anybody fool us and deceive us into thinking that great things were done and that we made progress. No, we didn't. That was the start. And then folks wanted to sit up here and declare the game over and go home. And then you take a look at where we are today. I think it's very symbolic. You got the name Braxton Bragg removed from the base, and I'll be damned, not even 2 years later, it's back again. Let that be your proof of how far you didn't go and how little was actually changed. We are not so naive, nor are we so short-sighted as previous generations were. We're calling it for what it is, and we understand that the work that's ahead of us is a whole lot harder than Edmund Pettus Bridge. And that brings me to the last part of it here. We have to be honest about these things. Because we do not want to repeat these mistakes. We shouldn't have to be doing this today. We should be focused on other things. Right now, y'all. White supremacy should have been beaten to the damn concrete. We're supposed to be focused on a whole different thing right now. This is what happens when you do not finish the job. It gets passed down to your children. Let's be clear, the civil rights generation did that deliberately. Here you go. We did enough here. We got to go snort some cocaine and have some bastard kids. And then they pass the problems down to the next generation. President Xi Jinping of China, he was talking about Taiwan, and he said that Taiwan's going to be dealt with in our generation. He said we will not pass this problem down to our children. When you take a look at Edmund Pettus Bridge, when you take a look at white supremacy, when you take a look at the way they're doing things and whatnot, y'all, you do not sit up here and deal with something and then say that part of your game plan is passing the fight down to your children. That's not supposed to be part of your game plan. Your game plan is not supposed to be so flexible that it allows you to pass down an enemy that you are fighting to your children. If you squabbing with this bastard in the front yard, you supposed to finish him off. How dare you sit up here and say, okay, well, when I get done, I'm going to go rest up and you kids can fight with him. What the hell? What kind of parent does that? What kind of parent does that somebody you fighting with? Because I got mothers and fathers in this room right now. I have mothers and fathers in this room right now. I'll be damned if any one of y'all would be sitting up here saying if there was somebody at your job giving you problems, somebody at your job messing with your family, somebody at your job messing with your kids. I don't think there's a single one of you who would say, well, you know what? I'll fight him for a little bit, but I'm going to leave him alone. My kids will be able to take care of him, though. I'm going to get my kids ready to fight him. I can't imagine there's a single one of you that will ever let those words come across your lips or run across your brain. That you got an issue with somebody and part of your game plan is, well, I ain't going to finish it. I'll let the kids take care of it. Let the kids take care of it. No, I ain't got time to let the kids take care of it. Jason, why not? I'm too busy fitting this nigga for a coffin.
And deal with it.
I'm too busy getting him fitted for a toe tag. The kids ain't gonna be able to do nothing with him. You're gonna be able to fit his ass in the shoebox when I get done. The kids ain't gonna even know he was here. What are you talking about? But for the civil rights generation, they thought it was honorable and acceptable to pass down the problems to the children, as opposed to make sure that these demons were destroyed and stomped out so that the children would only be told stories about them. Instead, they were still allowed to be in power, and they're like, okay, well, give me my cocaine, let me go shop at Walmart. For us, we are not doing half measures, and we're not doing symbolic gestures. We are here to finish the job, which is why we are going directly for the heart of the matter, the socioeconomics and our control of it. No half measures, no consolation prizes, no tokens. We are not looking for integration. We're not looking for symbolism. We are going exactly for cut the check. We are going for independent empowerment. We don't care who don't like it. We are not worried about offending Republicans or Democrats. We are not here to pass this problem down to the next generation. We are here to enact the focus of dealing with it once and for all. But to be clear, it is not part of our plan. Well, you know, in 60 more years, we'll still be fighting with it. That's not our plan. First and foremost, we're calling it out exactly the way it is. This is why it sickens me to see folks sitting up here singing. You don't sit in front of Donald damn Trump sitting up here singing. You don't sit in front of J.D. Vance and Mike Johnson singing. They don't need you to hum a damn tune. They don't need to be lullabied to sleep. That's not standing up for us, and that's not speaking up for us. That's passing the problem down, which is literally what Barack Obama said, by the way. Remember when he talked to Ta-Nehisi Coates, literally talking about, well, you know, you can't fix everything, so sometimes things take time. Saying that things take time, that's another way of saying we're going to pass this down to the children. You're not even going to confront the problem here and call it out for what it is. We need to make some uncomfortable moments, and we've been doing that. We need to make some enemies on both sides of the aisle, and we're doing that. That's what it means to say, I'm not passing this down. You're my problem, and I'm facing you and dealing with you right where you are. But I'm a Democrat. Today, you're the enemy. When you stop acting like an enemy, I'll stop calling you one. You're the adversary. You're the ops. Now, this is new. Let me just say something, y'all. This is new. Back in the 60s, the only black person who was talking against the Democrats was Malcolm X. That was it. Everybody else was like, well, let's see, we work with them. Today, you got a million Malcolms out here today. That is new. That's new. Some of y'all done scared your parents, you scared your grandparents, you scared your aunties, you scared your uncles. They ain't used to hearing your folk talking like this. They looking at y'all like you're Rosemary's Baby. They're looking at y'all like the girl in The Exorcist. They're looking at you like you grew a second head out of your neck. Oh, you can't talk like that. What are you doing? They hear y'all talking like that, and they act like you're about to get struck by 5 bolts of lightning. This is new. Yeah, because this is how you talk when you are not going to pass the problem down to the next generation. This is the way you talk. Yes, you talk like this. Trump gonna get in there. You act like this. Let him. Yeah, we give him tuition. Damn your tuition. Ooh, that's not passing the problem down to the next generation. That's what it looks like. Oh yeah, one more thing. And our cultural legacy. Oh, 720 degrees of analysis. Our cultural legacy, you damn right. Rock and rap and hip hop and country. These are our cultural legacies. We will not mince words. Those belong to us. Those belong to us. You will not sell guests in the house of hip hop as being the landlord. This is our legacy to pass down to our children. And what we have done in just the last couple of years is we have firmly snatched back the cultural cachet and ownership of what we've built. Just in the hip hop world, we have put the world on notice that we are here to take it back, and we are unapologetic about it, and we're doing it now, and we're not going to pass this down to the next generation. We gonna deal with you right here. Well, Jason, what about our white friends? If our white friends are offended at us telling the truth, then they're not our friends. Damn! If my white friends are afraid of me telling the truth about what I've built and what I own, then they're obviously not our friends. If they are upset and offended at us telling the truth about what we built and what we own, then they are obviously not your friend. So let's go ahead and offend the hell out of them now so we can see them get on the side of the fence they're going to be on. But what we are not going to do is back down, and we are not going to compromise. And we're damn sure not going to hand this down to the next generation. That's not going to be our plan. That, well, you know, we're going to move a little slow here and, you know, get the kids ready. I want the kids to be vigilant. I want them to be even more vigilant than we were. But I do not want to sit here and say, well, you know, kids, we're going to take it easy on them. But, you know, it's just like, if they do show up, though, you know, you're going to be good enough to fight with them. Nope. We're taking them all on right here, right now. We watch folks' political careers end. You're watching institutions go down. You're seeing people pulling their damn hair out. Yeah, this is what it looks like when you're not going to pass it down to the next generation. Massive upheaval. Folks feeling awkward. People coming to you and you ain't backing down. Yeah, it's like that. It's exactly like that. We're going to go ahead and wrap things up here tonight. If you are new here to the Black Channel, welcome to the Haven of Intelligent Black Thought. We do this every weekend, some holidays and days in between. Click that red subscribe button, click that yellow notification bell. Join us each and every time that we're here. If you haven't been to our website, Black Channel Films, check out our groundbreaking best-selling documentary work, blackchannelfilms.com. That is blackchannelfilms.com. I want to thank everybody who's contributed to support tonight's program on PayPal, Super Chat, Venmo, Melgo Mays. Thank you very much. Yemayad bin Israel. Yermayad bin Israel. Thank you very much for your support here and becoming a new member on the channel. I want to thank all of you for tuning in to tonight's program, live or recorded. Thank you for liking, subscribing, and sharing. And this concludes tonight's broadcast of the Black Channel. I am your host, your brother, your humble servant, the Black Authority. And until next time, my brothers and my sisters from around the world, remember, Black is the future, and the future is uncompromising.